The room was packed. Laughter and toasts echoed everywhere, as if everyone there had reason to celebrate, everyone except me. My heart was beating so loud that it almost drowned out the sound of the ambient music. Humiliation burned in his chest, hot as fire. I could feel the stares, the hidden whispers and, most of all, her gaze. The victorious and cold look that passed through me like a blade. I should have noticed the signs sooner, but I didn't. Now, surrounded by colleagues and strangers, it was too late to back down. I already knew what I needed to do. She laughed. It wasn't just any laugh, it was a laugh that spread throughout the room like a damned echo, accompanied by the soft touch of his arm sliding through yours. Glasses clinked and all eyes turned to us as he whispered something in her ear and she threw her head back, as if he had told the funniest joke in the world. But I knew. I knew this wasn't just a joke. It was a secret. A dirty secret she thought would remain buried forever. I stood there, still, watching her. Observing the way she acted, as if I didn't exist, as if I were nothing more than a faded shadow in the corner of that luxurious room. The drink in my hand shook slightly, but I didn't let go. My fingers clenched the glass as if it were the only thing that still held me together. She continued to laugh. He continued to ignore me. He continued to show off. I approached. 1 step. 2. The sound of my shoes against the marble floor mixed with the hustle and bustle around me, but my mind was sharp. I no longer thought about how it had started. I just thought about how it would end. My voice was firmer than I expected. Are you two having fun? I asked, and saw her face freeze for a second before composing herself. She smiled, but it was a forced smile. The kind of smile that only someone about to be unmasked can give. And him? He looked at me with a mix of superiority and nervousness. He knew. I knew that I knew. Of course we are. You should relax a little, darling. It's so tense, she said, venom dripping from every word. Honey. She even had the audacity to call me that. As if I hadn't just watched my life fall apart before my eyes. As if the man next to her wasn't the same man I'd seen leave the house last week while I was returning from a work trip. As if that hand that now rested on her waist wasn't the same one I had shaken as a sign of respect on another occasion. Tense. I repeated, laughing, but the sound of my laughter came out harsh, almost bitter. You are right. I'm tense. But I think everyone here will understand why when they hear what I have to say. The room fell silent. Someone downloaded the song. That's when I realized the weight of the moment. The eyes turned to us. She turned pale. Her lover tried to laugh, but he couldn't. I could feel the sweat running down his forehead. Don't do this, she whispered, and this time there was no arrogance in her voice. Just panic. Do what? Tell the truth. I replied, and the silence intensified. Tell all your friends here about the case you've been hiding. Tell them how you betrayed me. How did you lie? How did you humiliate me tonight in front of everyone? She tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. Her lover stepped forward, as if to stop me from continuing, but I had already gone too far to stop. And that's when I revealed everything. I told her about the messages, about the hidden meetings, about the lies she had told. I told her about the nights I spent alone while she pretended to be working late. I told him about the complicit looks that I pretended not to see. Shame hit her like a blow. I saw her eyes fill with tears, but I didn't feel sorry. Not after all. The people around started to whisper. Someone took the cell phone. They were recording. And she knew. She knew that night would mark her forever. But the worst was yet to come. Because, while she was trying to find words to justify herself, her boss approached. He looked at me and then at her. His expression changed. It got serious. What is that? He asked, addressing her. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just her marriage that was ruined. It was also the career. She started talking, mumbling apologies, but I had already walked away. I didn't need to hear it anymore. I knew nothing she said could change what had happened. She had made her choice. And now he was paying for it. But what she still didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that that night still held another revelation. Something I had discovered a few days ago. Something that would change everything. And when this came to light, she would realize that losing her job and being humiliated in front of her colleagues was just the beginning. Welcome to the channel where the truth about cheating is exposed without filters. Here, we do not and will never support any form of betrayal. Our stories are fictional, but they carry real lessons about how infidelity can destroy lives, relationships, and dreams. Get ready to dive into an intense narrative, full of emotions, twists, and unexpected consequences. Take a deep breath and prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear will move you in ways you never imagined. Good story. Ethan watched his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his tie while trying to ignore the tightness in his chest that had been with him for weeks. His tired eyes looked over every detail of his face marked by time, as if looking for traces of the confident man he once was. The spotless bathroom reflected soft yellow light, casting delicate shadows on the white walls. The morning routine had always been a time of calm, but this morning the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. On the other side of the door, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. Emily had always been fast, efficient, as if she was constantly on the move to prove something to the world. She entered the room, holding a pair of small, sparkly earrings that perfectly matched the red dress hanging on the closet door. Ethan watched her for a moment. She was beautiful, the kind of beauty that seemed to get better as the years went by. Wavy brown hair that fell softly over her shoulders, green eyes that carried a calculated sparkle, as if every gesture was carefully rehearsed. But there was something different that morning. A gleam in his eyes that Ethan didn't recognize. Emily smiled slightly as she adjusted her earrings and checked her reflection. He asked if he was ready, and Ethan nodded. The party would be important for both of them. She had always valued social events, especially those involving the company where she had worked for over 10 years. For her, every detail mattered, the impeccable makeup, the fitted dress, the shoes that matched the bag. For Ethan, however, the night already seemed tiring before it even began. He enjoyed the comfort of their home, the quiet evenings watching old movies and drinking cheap wine. But he knew Emily had bigger ambitions. She liked being surrounded by influential people, feeling like she was part of something great. Their home reflected this difference. While Ethan preferred simple furniture and cozy spaces, Emily insisted on modern decor and expensive pieces that looked like they came out of design magazines. The pristine white sofa, the abstract sculptures spread throughout the room, everything screamed perfection. It was as if the house was a stage carefully put together to show the world how successful they were. Ethan had accepted that, just as he had accepted so many other things over the years. On the way to the party, Ethan kept his hands firmly on the steering wheel while Emily typed quick messages on her cell phone. She laughed occasionally, responding to something he couldn't see. The sound of her laughter, which used to be music to him, now caused a slight discomfort. He tried to shake the thought away, telling himself it was just the accumulated stress of work and anticipation for that night. Emily noticed the silence and asked if he was okay. He forced a smile and said yes. But the truth was, Ethan was beginning to feel like there was something slipping through his fingers, something he couldn't name, but that made him uneasy. When they arrived at the party venue, an elegant, well-lit event hall, Ethan felt the weight of the room fall on his shoulders. People were impeccably dressed, champagne glasses sparkled under the lights, and soft music created a sophisticated atmosphere. Emily slipped into the room as if she had always belonged to that world, greeting colleagues and customers with wide smiles and quick hugs. Ethan remained a step back, watching. He knew many of the people there, but few of them actually knew him. Most saw him simply as Emily's husband, the quiet man who accompanied his wife to formal events and rarely participated in conversations. Ethan knew Emily stood out there. She was charismatic, articulate, and determined. His presence dominated any room. But that night, something felt different. She was more radiant, lighter. And at the same time, there was a subtle tension in his gestures, as if he were balancing something invisible. When Ethan wandered off to get a drink, he ran into old coworkers and exchanged quick words, trying to distract himself. But his gaze always returned to Emily. She was on the other side of the room, laughing at something someone had said. The man next to her was tall, well-dressed, and looked too comfortable. Ethan noticed the way the two leaned into each other, as if they shared something that no one else there knew. For a moment, he felt his heart tighten, but he pushed the thought away, remembering the countless times he had imagined problems that didn't exist. As the night wore on, Ethan tried to relax. He chatted with a few colleagues, smiled polite greetings, and watched Emily shine through the crowd. But the feeling persisted. It was as if he was in a play where everyone knew the script except him. Something was wrong, but he didn't know what. In the middle of the party, Emily returned to him. He asked if he was having fun and commented that he seemed distant. Ethan smiled and said he was fine, but asked who the man she had talked to earlier was. She responded quickly, explaining that it was just an important client and that she was discussing business. Ethan nodded, but the response sounded too rehearsed. He watched her as she walked back to the group and felt a knot in his stomach. Maybe it was tiredness. Maybe it was just insecurity. But as he watched her from afar, he noticed something in her gestures, something that made him question everything he thought he knew about their relationship. The night continued, and Ethan tried to stay present, but his thoughts were far away. Every smile of hers, every casual touch, every look shared with that man felt like a puzzle he couldn't put together. He wanted to believe it was just imagination, but the doubt was already planted. And at that moment, he realized he couldn't ignore her. Not that night. Not after that party. Something was about to change, and he knew it. What he didn't know was how deep that chasm would become. Ethan woke before dawn. The room plunged into a heavy silence that seemed to amplify the echoes of the night before. Emily was sleeping soundly beside him, her face serene and carefree, as if nothing had happened. He watched her for a long moment, trying to decipher the conflicting feelings that invaded him. There was love there, buried beneath layers of doubt and resentment, but there was also something darker, something he couldn't name. The faint scent of her perfume still hung in the air, reminding him of how flawless she looked at the party. Too impeccable, he thought, and the idea stuck in his mind like a splinter. He slipped out of bed without making a sound and walked to the kitchen. The freshly brewed coffee filled the room with its warm, comforting aroma, but Ethan could find no solace. His hands were restless, his thoughts spinning out of control. The image of Emily laughing with that man continued to haunt him. The way she tilted her head, the way she lightly touched his arm, as if that contact was natural. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the suffocating feeling that was overwhelming him. Maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe it was just paranoia. But the doubt persisted, insidious. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him turn around quickly. Emily appeared in the doorway, her hair messy and her eyes still half closed. She smiled slightly and asked why he was up so early. Ethan shrugged and said he hadn't been able to sleep, but his voice sounded distant even to himself. She reached out and touched his arm, a gesture that should have been comforting, but at that moment only increased the tension. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that everything was okay, but something inside him screamed otherwise. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept going back to the party, to the details that seemed small at the time but now seemed gigantic. He started paying more attention to Emily, observing her schedule, her habits, her phone conversations. Small changes started to stand out, messages answered quickly, calls that ended as soon as he entered the room, furtive smiles as he looked at his cell phone. He tried to convince himself it was just stress, but each new observation added more weight to the suspicion. One night, while Emily was taking a shower, Ethan saw her cell phone abandoned on the kitchen table. For a moment he hesitated. Going through her phone seemed to cross a line, but the need for answers spoke louder. His hands shook as he unlocked the screen. The messages were there, organized in a seemingly innocent way, but one conversation in particular caught his attention. The name was just a generic nickname, but the words exchanged were too intimate to be misinterpreted. Ethan felt his stomach drop. The sentences carried a tone he hadn't seen from Emily in a long time, a tone of desire, of anticipation. The sound of the shower turning off broke him from his trance. He quickly locked his phone and returned to the couch, trying to appear calm. When Emily entered the room, wrapped in the towel, he forced a smile, but the lump in his throat almost prevented him from speaking. She mentioned an appointment the next day and asked if he wanted to go out for dinner on the weekend. Ethan agreed, but his mind was already elsewhere, planning what he would do next. Over the next few days, the tension between them became palpable. Emily seemed distracted, always in a hurry, as if she were running out of time. Ethan tried to act normal, but inside he felt consumed by a mixture of anger and despair. He began to follow her movements more closely, observing every detail, every excuse. And then came the opportunity he didn't expect. On Friday, Emily mentioned a last-minute meeting and said she would need to leave early. Ethan pretended to believe it, wished him luck, and waited. As soon as she left, he grabbed his car keys and followed her. The route took him to a more remote neighborhood, a discreet place he had never visited before. Emily parked in front of a small office building and got out of the car. Ethan stood there, watching from a distance, until he saw her enter the building accompanied by a man he immediately recognized. His heart raced. The same man from the party. The confirmation hit like a punch in the stomach. He wanted to go in there, confront them right then, but he held himself back. He took a deep breath and waited. Minutes later, he saw the two leave together, laughing. They got into the man's car and drove off, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of the discovery. When he returned home, Ethan felt the world spin. He spent hours pacing back and forth, revisiting every moment of the past few months. The conversations, the looks, the subtle changes in Emily's behavior, it all made sense now. But what destroyed him most was the fact that she had been so careful, so skilled at hiding everything from him. He wondered if any part of their relationship was still real or if it was all just a well-told lie. That night, Emily returned late. She tried to kiss him when she walked in, but Ethan pulled away. He said he was tired and went up to his room. Lying in bed, he heard her footsteps through the house, the sound of her heels echoing like hammers. He knew he needed to confront her, but he wasn't ready yet. I still needed to understand what I would do next. Over the next few days, Ethan became distant. Emily noticed, but didn't insist. She looked relieved, as if his distance made it easier to continue the charade. But Ethan was just waiting for the right moment. And that moment came on the night of the second corporate party, when everything finally came to a head. The room was full again, but this time Ethan didn't feel the weight of the room. He was calm, almost cold, as he watched Emily interact with the guests. She was radiant, laughing and talking as if nothing had changed. And then he saw the man. He saw the look they exchanged, he saw the subtle touch on her arm, the same touch he had noticed at the first party. Ethan didn't wait any longer. He walked towards them, interrupting the conversation with a fake smile. Emily froze for a moment, but soon recovered her posture. The man tried to move away, but Ethan was faster. With a firm voice, he began to expose everything, the messages, the meetings, the lies. The words came out like blades, cutting through the air and leaving an oppressive silence in the room. Emily tried to defend herself, but the tears in her eyes only confirmed what everyone already knew. The man next to her seemed lost, unable to react. And Ethan? He just watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and pain. But as he watched Emily crumble under their judgmental eyes, he knew that this wasn't the end yet. There was something more. Something that would change everything. And when that was revealed, nothing would be the same as before. Emily remained motionless in the center of the room, her eyes fixed on Ethan as if begging for an explanation, but she knew that any words at that moment would only make things worse. The murmur of guests still echoed in the background, low voices mixed with shocked whispers. Ethan felt his heart beating like a drum in his chest, but his face remained impassive. There was nothing left to hide. He had finally exposed everything he knew about her affair with this man who, at that moment, looked as pale as Emily. But the worst was yet to come. He knew that night still held a revelation that no one in that room was prepared to hear, and the tension only grew as he decided how and when to drop the bomb he had been holding onto for days. Emily stepped forward, her voice shaky and thick with desperation as she asked for them to talk privately. Ethan laughed, a short, bitter laugh, as if the idea of discussing this away from other people's eyes was yet another desperate attempt to save appearances. She insisted, asking him to think about the time they had together, the years they shared, the family they had built, but Ethan just shook his head. His face showed an accumulated tiredness, as if he was finally feeling the weight of everything he had endured for so long. He looked at her lover, who remained silent, avoiding looking at him, and then turned his gaze to Emily. She tried to get closer, but he took a step back. He asked how she was capable, how she could lie for so long, how she had the courage to act as if everything was fine while maintaining a relationship in the shadows. Emily began to cry, denying that she had planned it, insisting that it had been a mistake, something that meant nothing. Ethan interrupted her, his voice now filled with a mix of anger and pain, saying that nothing she said could justify the lies, the humiliation, the contempt she showed for him. Emily continued to try to speak, but he raised his hand, silencing her before she could continue. He said she had made a decision, and now was the time to deal with the consequences. The room felt more cramped. The heavy air made it difficult for everyone present to breathe. The guests started to walk away, but Ethan called them back, saying he wasn't finished yet. Emily opened her eyes wide, begging him to stop, but he didn't. Ethan revealed that he had hired a private detective after becoming suspicious of her behavior and that there was more to it than just secret messages and meetings. There was concrete evidence, photos, recordings, enough evidence to ensure that she would not be able to deny what she had done. Emily burst into tears, but Ethan showed no compassion. He continued, saying that her lover was not only a coworker, but also a man who had previously been fired from other jobs for inappropriate behavior, and who was now using Emily to cover up his own financial problems. At this point, the lover tried to intervene, saying that it was a lie, but Ethan cut him off with a fierce look. He said he had evidence that he had tried to manipulate Emily, convincing her to use the couple's money to cover his personal debts. Emily immediately denied it, but Ethan already expected this reaction. He took an envelope from his jacket pocket and opened it, revealing copies of bank transfers, emails, and messages detailing each transaction. The guests looked at each other in shock, while Emily trembled, lost between tears and futile attempts to justify herself. Ethan, however, didn't stop there. He said the man had not only used Emily financially, but was also involved in a fraud investigation within the company itself. He revealed that same week, he had handed over all the evidence to Emily's boss, who was already aware of the situation. Emily screamed, asking him to stop, but Ethan continued. He said he knew she was aware of the risks, knew the consequences, but chose to go ahead anyway. She asked if their relationship really meant so little to her that she would throw it all away for a man like that. Emily tried to get closer, but he backed away again. The lover, now desperate, tried to leave, but was stopped by security guards who had already been warned in advance. Ethan looked at him dismissively before turning his attention to Emily, who now looked more fragile than he had ever seen her. She knelt on the floor, holding his hands and begging for forgiveness. She said it was a mistake, that she was sorry, that she would do anything to make amends for what she had done. But Ethan remained firm. He said that forgiveness was not something that could be achieved so easily, that some actions could not be undone, and that that night would be the end of everything they had built together. Emily cried non-stop, but Ethan only felt emptiness. For months he had struggled with doubt, fear, insecurity, but now that it was all out in the open, he felt free. Free to move forward, free to leave years of lies and false promises behind. But before leaving, he turned around one last time and said there was still one more thing she needed to know. Emily looked up, startled, as he revealed the final detail that no one expected. Her lover had been unmasked not just as a scammer, but as someone who had ruined the lives of other women before her. He said that same night, he would be arrested for fraud and embezzlement. The silence that followed this revelation was crushing. Emily broke down, realizing that not only had she destroyed her marriage, but also her career and reputation. Ethan left the room without looking back, leaving her surrounded by judgmental stares and hushed whispers. He knew that night would change everything, but he also knew that he was just beginning to rebuild himself. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control. The muffled sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway as Ethan left the room behind, but even with the doors closed, he could still hear the murmurs and shocked looks that hovered over Emily. Outside, the cool night air seemed unable to ease the weight in his chest. The anger and hurt fought for control, but there was something else emerging now, a sense of bitter freedom, as if he could finally breathe, even though each breath still hurt. He stopped for a moment, running a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. Everything he had planned had been exposed, but he knew there was still more to be done. That story was far from over. Emily came out right behind him, the hurried sound of heels breaking the silence. She called him by name, her voice choked and desperate. He didn't turn around immediately. He let her feel the urgency of the moment before looking at her. His eyes were red, his face stained with tears. She reached out her hand, but he instinctively recoiled, as if her touch were poison. "Ethan, please listen to me," her voice shook, almost begging. "I need to explain to you." Explain what?" He interrupted, his tone sharp as a blade. "Explain why you lied. Why did you betray me? Or explain how you managed to live this lie for so long. Because, honestly, there's nothing left for me to understand." Emily shook her head, tears falling freely as she tried to find the right words. "I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake, but I was confused. I felt alone, like you didn't see me anymore. As if I didn't exist." "You didn't exist." Ethan took a step forward, his voice low and thick. "I dedicated everything to you. All. I worked to build this life, to give you everything you needed, to be the man you said you wanted. And you trade me for someone like him? Someone who only used you." Emily choked, trying to speak, but the words stuck. Ethan continued. "Do you want to know what destroyed me most? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that you lied while you slept next to me. It was the fact that you looked into my eyes and told me you loved me as you ran into his arms. This is unforgivable." Emily fell to her knees, holding his hands, but Ethan pulled away. She sobbed, her face marked with despair. "I love you, Ethan. I love you. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake, but I never stopped loving you." "Love?" Ethan laughed, but the sound was empty. "If this is love, I'd rather have nothing." He turned to leave, but Emily screamed his name again. "You can't just leave like that. You can't leave me like this." Ethan stopped and looked at her. "You left me long before that. Now I'm just returning the favor." But before he could continue, he heard another voice, low and full of tension. It was Emily's boss, who had left the room and was approaching slowly. There was something in his gaze that made Ethan stop. "We need to talk," said the man, without looking away. Ethan frowned, but noticed Emily flinch, looking away. He felt a shiver run down his spine. Talk about what? The boss looked at Emily before turning his gaze back to Ethan. About what she did. And it's not just about you. Emily's eyes widened, pale as paper. Ethan felt his stomach sink. He knew something more was hidden, but he wasn't prepared for what he was about to hear. The boss continued. Emily wasn't just involved with that man. She was helping him embezzle money from the company. Accounts were manipulated, documents forged. And now there is an investigation underway. Emily sobbed loudly, trying to say something, but Ethan ignored her. His mind spun, quickly connecting the pieces. He turned to her, voice sharp. Did you know that? Did you know what you were getting into? I didn't know at first. Emily shouted, desperate. I swear, Ethan. He convinced me, said it was just a temporary adjustment, that there would be no consequences. I didn't know he would involve me like that. You knew, Ethan cut in, his gaze fixed on her. And he chose to continue. You chose to lie to me and everyone around you. Emily cried non-stop, but Ethan no longer felt sorry. He looked at his boss and asked what would happen next. The man responded that authorities were already involved and that Emily could face serious charges. She tried to interrupt, saying she could fix everything, but the boss was firm. It's past that point. Ethan was silent for a moment before turning to Emily. He finished. For us, for everything. He finished. She tried to follow him, begging him, but he kept walking, without looking back. Her words became more and more distant until they disappeared completely. In the parking lot, Ethan stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. He knew his life would never be the same again. I knew I would need to rebuild everything from scratch. But for the first time in a long time, he felt free. Free from lies, free from pain. And as he looked up at the starry sky, he promised himself that he would never let anyone destroy him like that again. Ethan drove down the deserted road, the city lights slowly disappearing in the rear view as silence filled the car like a suffocating presence. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, but he couldn't relax. The image of Emily kneeling on the floor, crying and begging for forgiveness, remained stuck in her mind. He wanted to push it away, he wanted to rip that scene out of his memory, but no matter how hard he tried, her words echoed like ghosts. I love you, Ethan. It was a mistake. I was confused. He knew that none of that mattered anymore, he knew that that phrase, said so many times that night, no longer had any meaning. But then why did I still feel the crushing weight of everything that had happened? The road seemed endless, but he didn't know where he was going. I just knew I couldn't stay still. Every mile he covered gave him the illusion that he was moving away from what had just happened, but deep down he knew it would follow him no matter where he went. His hands were shaking when he finally stopped the car at an abandoned gas station and turned off the engine. The silence was almost deafening. He leaned his head against the steering wheel, breathing deeply, trying to organize his thoughts, but the memories continued to invade his mind. Emily's face, the tears, the screams, the brutal revelation that he had not only been betrayed, but deceived on levels he could never have imagined. He wondered when everything had started to fall apart. He tried to search his memory for a specific moment, a breaking point where he could have done something different, but everything seemed blurry. Emily had always been ambitious, determined, and he had admired that about her. It was what had attracted him from the beginning, that confidence that radiated from every gesture, but now he wondered if that had always been just a facade. Had he been blind? Did you choose to ignore the signs? Or did he truly believe she was everything she claimed to be? The image of her lover appeared in her mind, and the anger returned, sharp and raw. He could accept the fact that their marriage wasn't perfect, that they had problems like any couple, but he couldn't accept the way she deceived him. More than that, he couldn't accept the fact that she allowed another man to use not only his trust, but also the financial resources they had built together. Everything they had achieved over the years was now tarnished by lies and manipulation. His cell phone vibrated in the passenger seat, interrupting his thoughts. He looked at the screen and saw Emily's name. For a moment he hesitated. Part of him wanted to answer, wanted to hear what she had to say, but the other part knew that any word from her would only make him angrier. He let the phone ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, a message appeared. "I need to talk to you. Please don't ignore me." Ethan threw his cell phone back on the bench and let out a long sigh. He knew that at some point he would have to deal with the consequences of what happened that night. He knew lawyers would be involved, that painful conversations would be inevitable, but at that moment, all he wanted was distance. He looked out the car window at the dark road in front of him and felt a pang of fear. Not fear of the future, but fear of the emptiness he felt at that moment, as if something inside him had been ripped out and left a hole that might never be filled. Hours later, as the sun was beginning to rise over the horizon, Ethan returned home. The place felt different, colder, stranger, as if it no longer belonged there. He walked through the door, smelling the familiar smell of coffee and perfume, but instead of comfort, it all felt like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. He walked slowly to the living room, where photos from his wedding and travels were still displayed on the shelves. He picked up one of them, a photo of the two of them smiling on their honeymoon, and felt his throat tighten. How had it turned into the chaos they were in now? As he looked at the photo, he heard the door open. Emily was there, her face swollen, her eyes red from crying. She stood there for a moment, as if she didn't know whether to go in or out. Ethan placed the photo back on the shelf and stared at it. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tired but firm. "I needed to see you," she replied, her voice breaking. "I needed to try to fix this. To repair." He gave a dry laugh. "Do you still think you can fix this?" Emily approached, but he took a step back. "I know I made a mistake. I know nothing I say will erase what I did, but I can't leave it like that. I can't lose you like this." Ethan stared at her, his eyes full of pain and contained fury. "You've already lost me, Emily. And the worst thing is that you didn't even notice when it happened." She cried harder, trying to reach him, but he pulled away again. "Please, Ethan. I was scared. I felt pressured, lost. I just wanted to feel alive again, but I didn't know it would end like this." He shook his head in disbelief. "Alive? Have you destroyed the life we built to feel alive? You used me, you lied to me, and now you want me to believe it was a moment of weakness?" She fell onto the couch, holding her face in her hands. "I love you. I still love you." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. When he spoke, his voice was low but firm. "I loved you too. More than anything. But what you did, you destroyed it. You destroyed us both." Emily looked up, desperate. "Then tell me what I can do. Tell me how I can fix this." He took a step back, as if physical distance could protect him from the pain. "I don't know if there is anything that can be fixed." She continued to sit there, crying, but Ethan knew he could no longer give in. "I knew that no matter how hard it was, I needed to move forward. Without her. Without the lies. Without the weight of that betrayal." And as he walked away, he felt like he was finally freeing himself, even if that freedom came with an emptiness that was impossible to ignore. Ethan stood in front of the window, watching the raindrops run down the pane like silent tears. The silence in the house felt heavier now, filled with memories he couldn't erase. The empty room, the photos removed from the shelves, the suitcases next to the door, everything was a cruel reminder that this life was over. There were no more us, no more shared plans. Just him, trying to piece together what was left. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, cutting into his thoughts. He hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Emily was there, her eyes swollen and her expression defeated. He seemed smaller, as if the weight of the choices he made had finally crushed the confidence he always carried. She held an envelope in her hands and held it out to him with trembling fingers. Ethan took the envelope without saying a word, tore off the flap and pulled out the papers. Legal documents, official confirmation that the divorce had been initiated. Emily took a deep breath, as if waiting for him to say something, but he just kept his gaze fixed on the papers. She began to speak, her voice breaking. He said he had lost everything, his job, his reputation, the money he had invested in his lover, and now his marriage as well. She said that he had disappeared after his arrest, leaving her to deal alone with the consequences and the accusations of involvement in financial crimes. He cried while saying he didn't know where to go, that he had nothing left. Ethan heard every word, but his face remained impassive. As painful as it was to see her like this, she knew that she herself had created that fate. She asked for forgiveness one last time, begging for any sign of hope, but Ethan closed the envelope and placed it on the table. I told her that forgiveness would not come, that some wounds could not be healed. Emily broke down, the tears falling heavy, but he didn't give in. He asked her to leave, to move on like he was trying to do. When she finally left, the door closed with a symbolic weight. He knew this was the true end. He sat down on the sofa, his body exhausted, but he felt something different. For the first time in months, the anger and pain began to give way to something new, relief. Over the next few days, Ethan focused on rebuilding his life. He immersed himself in work, spent more time with friends and rediscovered little things that previously seemed insignificant. He began running early in the morning, as he had done before he met Emily, and found comfort in the moments of silence that had previously suffocated him. But it was during a walk in the park, months later, that something unexpected happened. He bumped into a woman while trying to avoid a bicycle. She laughed, a light, sincere sound, and apologized. They talked for a few minutes, and Ethan felt something he hadn't expected, lightness. Her name was Sarah, and she was there with the dog, enjoying the sunny day. They exchanged numbers before saying goodbye, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel hope. While Ethan began to open up to new possibilities, Emily faced the consequences of her actions. She lost everything she had built and was forced to sell her house to pay off debts and legal expenses. She tried to rebuild her career in another city, but the stain left by the scandal continued to haunt her. She began to live in a more humble way, far from the social circles that previously defined her. Alone, she learned the hard way the price of the choices she made and the void left by what she sacrificed. Every day was a struggle to get back on her feet, but the ghosts of the past continued to haunt her. The lover, in turn, did not escape unscathed. He was convicted of fraud and embezzlement, serving time while trying to avoid new charges related to other schemes in which he was involved. His destroyed reputation and imprisonment made him an example of how lies and manipulations can lead to a downfall. Unlike Emily, he showed no regret. Just anger at being caught. His story ended in loneliness, forgotten by those who once trusted him. Ethan, however, moved on. He learned to forgive himself for trusting too much, for ignoring the signs, and for allowing himself to wallow in pain for so long. He discovered that starting over didn't mean forgetting, but accepting the past as part of who he was. Sarah became a constant presence, bringing lightness and simplicity to his life. Over time, the love I thought I had lost was replaced by something stronger, built on trust and transparency. The last time he saw Emily, months later, she was sitting alone in a cafe, staring at her blank cell phone screen as if waiting for something that wouldn't come. Ethan walked past her without saying a word, but for a moment, their eyes met. She smiled lightly, a sad smile, as if recognizing that this was a real goodbye. Ethan returned a discreet wave and continued on his way, feeling the weight of that story finally dissipate. Stories like this show how betrayal can destroy lives, but also how forgiveness and the courage to start over can open new doors. Each character paid the price for their choices, facing the consequences of their actions, and that is the biggest lesson that remains. Now we want to know what you thought of this story. Leave your comment and share your opinion. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, sign up to follow more impactful stories like this. Remember, this channel does not support any form of betrayal, but rather values the importance of trust and respect in relationships. Thank you for following until the end and until the next story.